This only. This only.
I think so, sir.
Yeah, that's okay. This will be.
In case you need this.
Thank you.
The light on.
Esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajshekharan Pillai, Mrs. Ram Reddy, Professor Sinclair, Professor Agarwal, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here to pay homage to Professor Ram Reddy, the founder, Vice Chancellor of IGNOU, a distinguished scholar of political science, an outstanding educationist, a builder of institutions, and above all, a great human being. Professor Ram Reddy had his education in Osmania University and the London School of Economics, and from even in those days, he was fired by this enthusiasm to increase the access of higher education. No wonder he was the founder of the B.R. Ambedkar Open University, and as a builder of institutions, he was responsible for the NAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. And he occupied many high positions, Vice Chancellor of Osmania University, Vice Chancellor of IGNOU, the Chairman of the University Grants Commission, and the Chairman of the ICSSR, and Vice Chairman of the Commonwealth of Learning. And rich in attainments, rich in honors, he also had a tremendous sense of humor. I once remember an occasion where we were both attending a discussion about the different systems of medical education, and the discussion became rather heated. And Professor Reddy intervened in his own inimitable way, gentle, completely unruffled. He said, well, you know, I have been a beneficiary of all these systems of medicine which are being discussed. Homeopathy, naturopathy, allopathy. But I can tell you, finally, I came to Tirupati. So he brought down the audience. I can never forget all the heat disappeared with that one intervention. It's a great privilege for me to speak in his honor today, and I'm deeply grateful to the Honorable Vice Chancellor and his colleagues for this invitation for me to speak here on this occasion. When we talk about medical education, we have the impression of a big building, big hospital, doctors going with white coats, etc. But it is good to remember that medical education was here for a long time ago. That's why I thought I should bring up this old story. If you read Buddhist literature, you will find lots of references to University of Taxila, which is Takshashila, which is now in Pakistan. And in Buddha's time, it was already a very well-established university, especially known for medical education. And this is, we also had in parallel a Gurukula system. University was in Takshashila, centralized, difficult to get admission, etc. But we also had, at the grassroots level, plenty of Gurukula systems. And if you read the Charaka Samhita, it is simply a series of discussions held in an ashram with no more than 10 participants, and Atreya is in the chair. That is how most of the Charaka Samhita chapters are in the form of discussions. That's how in Gurukula system, Ayurveda was taught in those days. In the universities, not only Ayurveda, but all systems, all types of knowledge, including mathematics, metaphysics, they were all taught. Now, Takshashila, the most outstanding alumnus was Jivaka, who was Buddha's physician. A great deal about him is known in the Buddhist literature, and we find that there was an admission procedure. Either a senior professor could select on the basis of his own interview, or they had to go through a committee called Dwara Panditas. Two types of admissions in Takshashila. And Jivaka was admitted directly by a professor. And there was a fees they had to pay. For a medical student, it was 1,000 masurans, whatever coin it was. And Jivaka was poor. He had traveled all the way from Pataliputra. He was an orphan. traveled all the way to Takshashila to study medicine. And when he was interviewed, the professor was greatly struck by his intelligence, this teenager. He asked him, "Have you brought the fees?" So he said, "Sir, I have no money, but I am willing to serve." So that was also accepted in lieu. He could serve the university in some capacity. So he served the professor for 7 years. And then there was a final test which was conducted to award the diploma or the permission to practice. So you read all about it in those days. And the Gurukula system, very different from this university system. It was always in an ashram type where the teacher was living, mostly in the forest, like Himalayan countryside, like Charaka's own. And the interesting thing is when the great universities like Takshashila and Nalanda, they were destroyed by invaders, the Gurukula system survived. That is how. If it was only university-based, there would have been no Ayurveda today. But the Gurukula system at the grassroots, thousands of them, they survived. Not only the 900 years, the Islamic rule, when there was a benign neglect of Ayurveda, then the European, from the 19th century, for 2 centuries, there was an active suppression of Ayurveda by the British administration. But in spite of all this Gurukula system survived. Now, there is a lesson for us in this. And how did it survive without any kind of state support? State discouragement, if you like. Mainly because of the inherent strength. There is some scientific strength in Ayurveda for its survival. And second, the support from the common people. They would always go for because without these two, it could not have survived. So therefore, any system of knowledge which has no indigenous base, it is very unlikely to survive in this country. That's a lesson we learn here. There must be some inherent strength for a system of knowledge to survive and grow in this country. Now, the modern medical education, of course, everybody knows about it. It dates back to the 19th century, the second half especially, when the British administration, they established medical colleges starting with Calcutta, Madras, Bombay. And this was warmly received by the native, the Indians. Even though we had our own system, when the British started the first medical college in Calcutta, as you know, the first year there is a dissection of the cadaver. And in India, we have all these taboos about touching the dead body. So the British were greatly worried whether this type of education will be accepted by the Indians. And the first dissection was done by a man called Madhusudan Gupta, the first Bengali to do the dissection. With great trepidation, everybody was worried how it is he's going to take a knife and cut this body, but he did it. But from the second year onwards, 100 dead bodies were dissected. So the prejudice disappeared overnight. The welcome was total for modern medical education. And Medical Council of India, the act was passed in 1933, but it came into existence in 1934. It was amended in 1956, further amendments in 64, 93, 2001, and finally, in the Platinum Jubilee year, the whole thing was repealed. That is where we are today. Now, the main objectives of the Medical Council of India, when it was established by the British, was maintenance of uniform standards of education at undergraduate and postgraduate level, recommending the recognition or derecognition of Indian and foreign medical qualifications, registration of medical graduates, and operating a reciprocity protocol with other countries in this field. But after this, the original act was passed, subsequently at various times, the government would bring in regulations and add on to these a series of functions about disciplinary action, about postgraduate degrees. So many things have been added on to the functions of the Medical Council in an ad hoc manner, depending if there is a demand, there is a response. It was usually a regulation adding on to the functions of the Medical Council. And the functions of the Medical Council, it was originally conceptualized both as a regulatory body and a promotive body. Both these roles were envisaged. But in actual fact, the promotive functions took a back seat over the years. And in fact, the only promotive function in the recent years, it was only giving some money for various organizations like IMA to conduct continuing medical education programs. Otherwise, it was primarily a regulatory body. And it is very clear because the advances in medical education, as I'll have occasion to deal with later, we cannot really claim any great advances in medical education came from India, in spite of having such a very large system, as the Vice Chancellor referred to. We have cosmetic changes, but nothing significant, which the world takes notice of. And the challenges in medical education, what we face, some of these themes will come again and again. One is the isolation from the university mainstream. This is a problem which continues even today, and there are several reasons for it. It seems like it is irrevocable today. But in the university system, as you know, we follow the affiliate colleges system in India, even though it was condemned by the Radhakrishnan Commission, by the Kothari Commission. They all wanted to get rid of this affiliate system, but we cannot get rid of it. So there are universities with 700 colleges affiliated, and so on. Now, when it happens like that, a university, the governing bodies like syndicate, senate, and so on, when they are dealing with problems of these affiliate colleges, their examinations, various problems associated, the medical college may be 2 or 3. So what generally happens in the university system, when all these other faculties, other colleges, their problems are discussed, the medical, it doesn't get any attention really. And the second problem is, the medical college, unlike other colleges, it has a very large hospital, and that dominates the medical college and medical education. So the problems related to hospital management, hospital quality, all these, there is no proper forum in the university to voice these. This is another reason why the medical colleges, medical education tended to drift away from the mainstream of education. In that process, both are impoverished, which I will talk about later. It is a great tragedy, actually, because university, as Professor Yashpal's report says, it is a comprehensive term. It comprehends all types of knowledge, not just humanities. It's science, medicine, engineering, law. That is what university is all about. But somehow in India, we have managed to fragment them to such an extent. Now we have medicine, now we have pharmaceutical sciences. They're all becoming smaller and smaller, becoming universities. Now that is one problem that we have, a basic problem. The second problem in medical colleges, the entry point is 10+2. Now 10+2, as you know, now there are entrance examinations, so the students are sharply focused. They want to pass this entrance examination to get into the medical college. It's highly competitive. And they have physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics. All the rest of, all the other subjects, they are completely ignored. They lack a liberal base when they come to a medical college. And see the contrast with a highly technologically oriented country like the United States. There they insist, only after a first degree they come to the medical college. So they are mature. They have a certain amount of liberal education. And in addition to this, famous institutions like Johns Hopkins Medical School, very highly competitive entrance examination. But once a student gets entrance admission to Johns Hopkins, they are encouraged to take a year off and go on to do archaeology or sociology or music, whatever, so that they have 1 year they should spend in liberal studies. They encourage students to do this. And the reason being, they want well-rounded individuals to join the medical school. Now, what we are doing is exactly the opposite. That is the second problem, the lack of a liberal base. Students come sharply focused on medicine. They become highly skilled technicians. They're not aware of the society. They're not aware of the environment. And that greatly discourages originality, original thinking, and many other problems. Now, the third is the right blend. In medicine, we have on the one hand public health, family medicine, the rural healthcare, all those which are the dominant issues in India. But at the same time, we also have great advances taking place in medicine. We cannot deny that. We are talking about medical tourism. We've got corporate hospitals, open heart surgery, transplantation, all kinds of things are happening in this country. And millions of people, maybe 10 or 15% of Indians, are using those services. Now, medical students should have some knowledge about these also. But how do you bring about a balance, a healthy balance between these two, which are in a way opposed to each other, but we have to reconcile them in a medical education system without affecting the basic skills of a doctor. Now, these are some of the major challenges which some of these themes will keep coming again and again. Now, if you look at the undergraduate and postgraduate, these are sharply distinguished in medicine. The undergraduate education is essentially you take this 10+2 promising human material and you mold them into a sculpture, a human being. That's the first stage. The whole purpose is a general promising material. You are sculpting an individual, a physician, who can safely practice medicine on the public. That is the aim of undergraduate medical education, who should have the basic knowledge, the basic skills, the basic attitudes, how to talk to a sick person, how to talk to the relatives of a dying patient. These are something which you have to educate. It's not easy to talk to them, but that is also part of education. So that is all in the undergraduate level. But the postgraduate level, it is an act of refinement, because we need, from this basic material sculpture that you have developed, you need medical educationists, you need teachers, you need medical scientists, you need surgeons, physicians, all sorts of specialists. That is a subsequent act of refinement. But the important thing is, if the first prototype that you have sculpted, if that is defective, there is no way the refinement is going to give you a good specialist. So the undergraduate, that development is extremely important. Now this is the pattern just to familiarize the non-medical audience here. The preclinical is 1 year, where we have anatomy, biochemistry, physiology. These are the basic subjects. And note here, these are actually science subjects, like anatomy. It's not only human beings who have anatomy. The dog has anatomy. The fish has anatomy. So it is a comparative anatomy. If you look at the whole spectrum of anatomy in biology, human anatomy is a very small part. Similarly with physiology or biochemistry. So when you look in the context of evolution, these are scientific subjects. We take a little bit for the purpose of medical education. The second, paraclinical, which is a little closer to the practice of medicine, where we have pathology, the study of diseases, microbiology of organisms. Again, remember, these are all science subjects, like microbiology. This is a very vast subject. It's not only human beings who have microbes. So again, we only look at the human part of microbiology, or pathology for that matter, pharmacology, community medicine. Now here we are coming closer to human practice, community medicine, and forensic medicine. And forensic medicine, again, forensic science. That's a very big subject. We take the human part of it, so it becomes forensic medicine. So essentially, these are all scientific subjects, a little closer to the practice of medicine. And the last 2 years, clinical, these are the medicine proper. We have medicine, we have surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, pediatrics, and many other subspecializations. So this is the pattern of education that we follow in India, approved by the Medical Council. And this is followed by 1 year of internship. Then only they're eligible to get the degree. Internship is a time when they spend 2 months, 1 month in different specialities. They actually get hands-on experience. But unfortunately in India, what we have managed to do is internship. We have defeated the very purpose, because as soon as they finish the 4 years, they start working on the entrance examination for postgraduate degrees. So you will not see the students, the interns in the wards, looking at patients. They'll be sitting and reading in the library. So we have basically frustrated the whole purpose of internship. Now the undergraduate medical education, the Medical Council, there was a meeting in 1994, they recommended active learning. Instead of giving lectures like we used to have 50, 55 years ago, medicine was taught in the form of lectures. That should be discouraged. There should be active learning. That was encouraged. Integrated teaching at the level of the organ. So when you are discussing the anatomy of the liver, why not discuss the pathology of the liver also, diseases affecting the liver, treatment of liver diseases. That makes it much more interesting. So the integrated type of teaching at the level of the organ, at the level of a disease, of a process, etc. And medical education departments to train teachers. This is what I was telling our distinguished Vice Chancellor. It was recommended by this particular workshop that there should be medical education departments in all medical colleges. But as a matter of fact, less than 5% of the medical colleges have medical education departments. So somebody who is appointed, I was appointed as an assistant professor of surgery many years ago. I had absolutely no training to teach surgery. So it would have been nice to have some kind of training, but all these recommendations which were made, they have been hardly implemented. That is the record of it. Now the major concerns in undergraduate medical education, that is important. Now, the point which I raised earlier, the ratio of rural health, public health, and science and technology in the physician's training, what is the right kind of ratio? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Now, that kind of ratio, we have failed to work it out. Even though from Board Committee, we had a series of big committees, Board Committee, Mudaliar Committee, Bajaj Committee, etc. All these committees have recommended that we should have these community physicians, social medicine, etc. Because 70% of Indians live in villages, medicine has to be accessible to them, so that must give priority. That balance we have not been able to achieve. The second, to promote an inquiring mind among the young physicians. This is the point which I made. At 10+2, the students who come, they are very bright students who manage to come into medicine. But their inquiring mind begins to become sterile very quickly. I want to give one or two examples. Incidentally, it is good to remember Western medicine came to India in the 19th century. But in 2 centuries, I cannot think of any advanced contributions made by an Indian physician, whether in diagnosis, whether it is in concepts, whether it is in technology, which has had a global impact. Something developed by an Indian, something conceptualized by an Indian, being used all over the world, like Raman spectroscopy. It was discovered by C.V. Raman in Calcutta, but it is used all over the world today. You cannot practice physics without Raman spectroscopy. Is there an equivalent in medicine, 200 years? The fact is there is none. That's something we should recognize. And the inquiring mind, I have a personal, very vivid experience. Some 20 years ago, in Bombay, the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore, they had a practice at that time. The council members of the academy, they had to give 2 lectures in 2 institutions selected by the academy. And one will be an ordinary college, the other will be a professional institution. So in my case, the academy asked me to give a lecture in the Sophia College, Bombay, which is a college, on a subject, cardiology, which was my subject. But I had to choose a subject which would be intelligible and interesting to the college students. And the second lecture was to be given before a medical audience, which was in Nair Hospital Medical College, 2 consecutive days. And the first lecture in the Sophia College, Dr. Chidambaram was chairing the meeting. I chose, these are all young girls, no use talking about heart disease. So I chose the subject, heart as a pump. It's an extraordinary pump, how this functions. It doesn't have fatigue. It starts beating even in the mother's uterus, the heart starts beating, the fetus. Almost 6 weeks you can see it beating. It keeps on beating. The valves open and close 100,000 times a day. In 10 years, it is 400 million times it is opening and closing. And we are all sitting here, it is pumping 5 liters. But suppose there is some kind of crisis, people have to run away from here. In no time, it will be pumping 10 liters, 12 liters a minute. Which pump can do this? It's an extraordinary pump. So I talked for 45 minutes on heart as a pump. Then the questions, they went on and on. Very interesting questions, half an hour. Finally, there was a nun, the principal. She said, "Doctor, we have to stop. Otherwise, these girls will never stop." I'll never forget that. That was the extent of curiosity, inquisitiveness. The next day, in Nair Hospital, I gave a lecture on a type of heart muscle disease in which we were working very hard at that time, very interesting findings on a disease called endomyocardial fibrosis. And Dr. K.G. Nair was chairing the meeting. I spoke for 45 minutes. Questions? No questions. I'll never forget that. Here, these are the same Sophia College girls are coming and joining the medical college. But in a matter of few years, we have killed their inquisitiveness. Now, this is what happens, that inquiring mind. How do you encourage that? How do you nurture that? That is the basis of all creativity, all research. That is a very big problem that we have to face. Second is promoting values like compassion, probity, and other ethical values. Another very, very big issue today. I don't have to say that, the dismissal of the medical council itself. Now the problem is made much worse because here we have to somehow convey this to these young people. You have to be merciful in a merciless environment. You have to be honest in a dishonest environment. So this is the problem. In a very adverse environment, you have to cultivate these values. This is another problem which we have not overcome. And the last is the promote lifelong learning. It has to become second nature. It's part of the inquiring mind, not just to attend a CME to get a certificate. I don't mean it in that sense. That is necessary. But you have to do much more than that. Your learning only ends with your death. So that attitude, a philosophy of life, that learning, it is good in itself. We need to do that. That has to be cultivated. And that, again, is a major problem in undergraduate education, because if you don't cultivate these at postgraduate level, certainly they are not going to do any of this. And then going on, the current status of undergraduate education, as I mentioned, there are a number of committees have mentioned, recommended that rural health, public health, that should be emphasized. But the fact of the matter is community medicine has the least priority in a medical college today. If you ask medical students how many of them would like to specialize in community medicine, you will hardly find any takers. And there are many reasons for it. One of them, they are practical reasons. Even if there are students, I don't believe they are not idealistic. Because in 1994, I went to Manipal. The next year, we wanted to start a Center for Humanities in Manipal. And to start that as an inaugural, I invited M.N. Srinivas, one of the most outstanding sociologists of India. I invited him to go and give a lecture on village India. And the hall was packed. And he gave an extraordinarily brilliant lecture, inspiring. Now, what happens these inspired students when they come out? Suppose they want to choose public health. There is no public health cadre in Karnataka or anywhere in India. Somebody who chooses medicine or surgery, he can go on to civil surgeon or whatever. There is a cadre for him to go up. Whereas in public health, there is no such cadre. In Karnataka, they used to have one, but some 30 years ago, they abolished it. So there is no cadre for them. And when they look at the top positions, DGHs, DHs, etc., these are all surgeons and physicians. No public health person ever gets these jobs. And if you take public health, when you are posted somewhere, you have no facilities, housing, nothing is there. So how would you expect an idealistic young doctor to choose this line? There are many, many practical problems like these. So that we have not been able to achieve. Second, research culture is lacking in medical colleges. I'll show you some figures, very revealing figures in the next one or two slides. The entire emphasis in the MBBS course is to pass examinations. That's all the interest. If there is any subject which is not related to examinations, you will find no interest in medical colleges. And advances in like modern biology, medical technology, all these great advances which are taking place. I remember even in many years ago, Rosalind Yalow, who had been awarded the Nobel Prize just 3 months earlier, she was the inventor of radio immunoassay to estimate very tiny, small levels of endocrine secretions and so on, proteins. Now she was awarded Nobel Prize. She came to Trivandrum 3 months after this announcement. So we arranged a lecture by Rosalind Yalow. I made personal calls to the university, to medical college, number of institutions. I thought the whole place would be crowded. Our small hall would not be able to contain this audience. But to my extraordinary embarrassment, 4 o'clock was the lecture, and by 3:40, I had only some 10, 15 people. Ours was a small institution. So I was in sheer panic. I thought we had only 50 seats in our hall. So I asked all our nurses to come. They all had blue saris in those days. So I called our medical superintendent. I said, you please send all the nurses. So I was doing all this, arranging an audience, so Dr. Yalow arrived 10 minutes earlier. She could see what was going on. She was a big woman, so she put her hand on my shoulder. She told me, you don't have to do this. And the reason, then I called the professors, some of them. I said, look, I telephoned you. How come your students didn't come? They said, this is not a subject which will come for the examination. Because radio immuno, I said, nobody is going to ask any question. So nobody came. That is the problem. So in these extremely interesting, the frontier areas, there is no interest. And if you go to medical colleges today, in the common room, it is not scientific subjects. Often the subject of discussion is the corruption, dismissal of the medical council. This is all you will hear. Capitation fee, 70 lakhs is paid there. This is the culture in which medical students are being brought up. So this is very disturbing, but these are the facts which we should face. And we have more than 300 medical colleges now. There is a central body like MCI, but innovations in medical education in the last 30 years. What are the innovations? The fact is, very few. I'm not able to. When I read that, like 3 months posting is made 2 months, I do not regard this as progress. These are small cosmetic arrangements they are making. I mean by, and Dr. K.G. Nair was chairing the meeting. I spoke for 45 minutes. Questions? No questions. I'll never forget that. Here, these are the same Sophia College girls are coming and joining the medical college. But in a matter of few years, we have killed their inquisitiveness. Now, this is what happens, that inquiring mind. How do you encourage that? How do you nurture that? That is the basis of all creativity, all research. That is a very big problem that we have to face. Second is promoting values like compassion, probity, and other ethical values. Another very, very big issue today. I don't have to say that, the dismissal of the medical council itself. Now the problem is made much worse because here we have to somehow convey this to these young people. You have to be merciful in a merciless environment. You have to be honest in a dishonest environment. So this is the problem. In a very adverse environment, you have to cultivate these values. This is another problem which we have not overcome. And the last is the promote lifelong learning. It has to become second nature. It's part of the inquiring mind, not just to attend a CME to get a certificate. I don't mean it in that sense. That is necessary. But you have to do much more than that. Your learning only ends with your death. So that attitude, a philosophy of life, that learning, it is good in itself. We need to do that. That has to be cultivated. And that, again, is a major problem in undergraduate education, because if you don't cultivate these at postgraduate level, certainly they are not going to do any of this. And then going on, the current status of undergraduate education, as I mentioned, there are a number of committees have mentioned, recommended that rural health, public health, that should be emphasized. But the fact of the matter is community medicine has the least priority in a medical college today. If you ask medical students how many of them would like to specialize in community medicine, you will hardly find any takers. And there are many reasons for it. One of them, they are practical reasons. Even if there are students, I don't believe they are not idealistic. Because in 1994, I went to Manipal. The next year, we wanted to start a Center for Humanities in Manipal. And to start that as an inaugural, I invited M.N. Srinivas, one of the most outstanding sociologists of India. I invited him to come and give a lecture on village India. And the hall was packed. And he gave an extraordinarily brilliant lecture, inspiring. Now, what happens these inspired students when they come out? Suppose they want to choose public health. There is no public health cadre in Karnataka or anywhere in India. Somebody who chooses medicine or surgery, he can go on to civil surgeon or whatever. There is a cadre for him to go up. Whereas in public health, there is no such cadre. In Karnataka, they used to have one, but some 30 years ago, they abolished it. So there is no cadre for them. And when they look at the top positions, DGHS, DHS, etc., these are all surgeons and physicians. No public health person ever gets these jobs. And if you take public health, when you are posted somewhere, you have no facilities, housing, nothing is there. So how would you expect an idealistic young doctor to choose this line? There are many, many practical problems like these. So that we have not been able to achieve. Second, research culture is lacking in medical colleges. I'll show you some figures, very revealing figures in the next one or two slides. The entire emphasis in the MBBS course is to pass examinations. That's all the interest. If there is any subject which is not related to examinations, you will find no interest in medical colleges. And advances in like modern biology, medical technology, all these great advances which are taking place. I remember even in many years ago, Rosalind Yalow, who had been awarded the Nobel Prize just 3 months earlier, she was the inventor of radio immunoassay to estimate very tiny, small levels of endocrine secretions and so on, proteins. Now she was awarded Nobel Prize. She came to Trivandrum 3 months after this announcement. So we arranged a lecture by Rosalind Yalo. I made personal calls to the university, to medical college, number of institutions. I thought the whole place would be crowded. Our small hall would not be able to contain this audience. But to my extraordinary embarrassment, 4 o'clock was the lecture, and by 3:40, I had only some 10, 15 people. Ours was a small institution. So I was in sheer panic. I thought we had only 50 seats in our hall. So I asked all our nurses to come. They all had blue saris in those days. So I called our medical superintendent. I said, you please send all the nurses. So I was doing all this, arranging an audience, so Dr. Yalo arrived 10 minutes earlier. She could see what was going on. She was a big woman, so she put her hand on my shoulder. She told me, you don't have to do this. And the reason, then I called the professors, some of them. I said, look, I telephoned you. How come your students didn't come? They said, this is not a subject which will come for the examination. Because radio immuno, I said, nobody is going to ask any question. So nobody came. That is the problem. So in these extremely interesting, the frontier areas, there is no interest. And if you go to medical colleges today, in the common room, it is not scientific subjects. Often the subject of discussion is the corruption, dismissal of the medical council. This is all you will hear. Capitation fee, 70 lakhs is paid there. This is the culture in which medical students are being brought up. So this is very disturbing, but these are the facts which we should face. And we have more than 300 medical colleges now. There is a central body like MCI, but innovations in medical education in the last 30 years. What are the innovations? The fact is, very few. I'm not able to. When I read that, like 3 months posting is made 2 months, I do not regard this as progress. These are small cosmetic arrangements they are making. I mean by the examples, problem-based learning, computer-assisted learning. Here the student himself is learning, active learning, simulation training for clinical skills. For example, before you do an operation, before you do a procedure, for the first time on a patient, today you can actually do it using a computer. All these are available, virtual reality. But all this is developed abroad. Here we have software, we are considered to be a world power. We have got first-rate technologists, we have got first-rate doctors. How is it we are not developing any of these? Even today, we have to, first time, it is on the patient. That training, simulation training in clinical skills, objective structured practical examination. All this, I have just taken a few, there are many, many more. All these were developed abroad, not a single one developed in India. And these were developed by small universities, not great like Harvard and so on. Often they are small universities in Britain, in Canada, in the United States. They are innovative. And most of these contributions have come from those places. And look at the research record. 1996, All India Institute did a survey. It was published in the National Medical Journal. I took it from there. 135 medical colleges, number of publications, only 66% had no publications. This is the record in 1996. Subsequently, the ICMR, Dr. Satyanarayana, he did a survey from 2004 to 2006, and you can see by that time the number of medical colleges were 280. And you can see published one or more papers. That more often means 5 or 6. One or more papers published. In 2004, only 120. 2005, 138. 2006, 152. It is a pitiful performance. A medical college publishing 2 papers. Even that is included in this. So the rest of them, they have published nothing. So you can see what a poor record we have in this research contributions. Now, coming to the administration, undergraduate medical education in Britain, our Medical Council of India, the template is the General Medical Council of Britain. But in Britain, General Medical Council, it is a quasi-governmental. Government has a small role, but very little. But they have always, all these many, many years they have been in existence, they have confined themselves to undergraduate medical education, MBBS or MBCHB as they say. That is, they make sure that the persons who get the MBCHB from a university or a medical school, they have the basic knowledge, they have the basic skills, they have the basic attitudes to practice medicine safely on the public. They do not go into anything else. That is all they do. Not only that, only 2/3 of the curriculum they control. 1/3 is left to the university in Britain. In the United States, undergraduate medical education is largely left to the universities and medical schools. And the only control is that by the Council for Graduate Medical Education and the accreditation committees which come every 5 years or so, joint committee for accreditation. Both these bodies are non-governmental. Government has nothing to do with it. These are all autonomous bodies set up by the medical profession, medical colleges. Government has nothing to do with it. But in India, we did not choose either of these models. We have both undergraduate and postgraduate medical education with the Medical Council of India, which is controlled by the Health Ministry. So we did not accept the British model. We did not accept the American model either. We chose our own. Now the postgraduate, the pre- and paraclinical subjects, which I mentioned earlier, these are essentially science subjects. And we would expect research. That is the only way you are going to investigate. Suppose a new disease appears. A practicing doctor, he has no idea how to investigate that disease. He sees something unusual. Young people coming with mad cow disease. The mad cow disease, some of you would have heard that. It is actually a disease like, let us say, Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's type of disease, if you see it in an 80-year-old man, that is expected. But suppose you see that disease in a 20-year-old man, then you start thinking, why is it like this? Suppose you see one. 2 weeks later, you see another one. Now, a doctor sees it, but he cannot investigate it. He needs all these pre- and paraclinical subjects. You need their help. Now, that research, essentially, that we have been extremely negligent. As I mentioned, you can look at the number of papers. There are no papers published. But because the MD-MS examinations in these pre- and paraclinical subjects, they are essentially examination-oriented in medical colleges. They are not research degrees like PhD in biochemistry. It's very different from MD in biochemistry. PhD in biochemistry is a research degree where you have to do serious work, 4 or 5 years to get a PhD. You are an accomplished scientist. You can start doing independent research. You can publish papers. You can take PhD students to work under you. Whereas an MD biochemistry is not able to do any of this because essentially it is an examination-oriented, a career-oriented. And this is encouraged by the Medical Council because to be the head of a department in a medical college, you have to be a medical doctor. A PhD in biochemistry, let us say he has got half a dozen papers in Nature, he cannot be the head of a department of biochemistry. And even the percentage of people, non-medical scientists, who can work in these departments is determined by the Medical Council. It is only a small percentage. So it is actually discouraged. So therefore, this is a very serious matter, pre- and paraclinical subjects, the total absence of any kind of research, and this examination-oriented approach to these subjects. Now, clinical subjects, when it comes to medicine, surgery, obstetrics, now here the quality varies enormously. What has happened over the years, there is a very dynamic private sector in India. I don't have to tell you this. What has happened is great medical colleges existing for 100 years, all in the public sector, they have all been kind of deteriorating. You simply have to go and look around. They cannot replace, there is no money to buy new equipment, so they are stuck with old equipment. Faculty promotion is all based on seniority. Like somebody with a PhD, he cannot be promoted. Everything is bound by Medical Council of India rules, etc. So poor investment, poor administration. By all these policies, the public sector, teaching institutions, they have deteriorated. You go to any Madras Medical College, JJ Hospital, Bombay, any great institute, SSKM in Calcutta, everywhere you will see this, a deterioration in standards. But those are the places which are training people. Whereas the private sector, they have everything. They have got the most modern equipment. Patients are coming from abroad. They are accredited, very top doctors, excellent equipment. Everything is available, but they are not training anybody. There is no approval for training. So we have an extraordinary situation. We have all the facilities and institution doing, that is, 2,000 open heart operations a year. That is not recognized for MCH and cardiothoracic surgery. But there may be a college, a teaching program recognized for MCH, they are doing 200 operations a year with necessarily poor results. And the professor there, he has got 15 years of teaching experience. What good is that experience? But he is the one who will get into all the committees, in the medical council, deciding the standards for cardiac surgery. Now we have an absurd situation, we have created it because of this. Failing to take into account what is happening all around us, dynamic changes, they are not reflected in our regulatory procedures. And our degrees, postgraduate degrees, they are not recognized abroad. If at all they are recognized, like a lot of people go to the Gulf countries, and many of them will tell you they are paid half the salary of that somebody coming with an FRCS from England. But they accept it. It is better than what they get here. But the fact is, this is very much devalued abroad. And one more thing, we have a National Board of Examinations in India set up by the government. And that National Board conducts examinations in different parts of India. And when candidates with MDMS from various universities, when they appear in this National Board in the same subject, let us say surgery, I have personal experience in cardiothoracic surgery. People with MCH from different universities in India, when they appear in the National Board, the first time, not even 50% clear the examination. The National Board they used to have the data. So why this happens? Because these candidates, they don't have the turf advantage. When they take the MD or MS examination, they are appearing in their own university. They have that advantage of the turf. It is their turf. But National Board, it is like going and taking the fellowship examination in London. A man from Kerala, he goes to Calcutta, he has to take the exam there, or maybe Delhi. He doesn't have that advantage. So the results, this speaks for itself, the quality of our postgraduate degrees. Now, medical council and universities, a subject which is exceedingly important, the General Medical Council, as I said earlier, they only look at 2/3 of the undergraduate curriculum. 1/3 is left to the universities to innovate, to experiment. And Britain is more or less a homogeneous country. What is the difference, Scotland and England or Wales? We cannot see that much different, but they are given the 1/3, they are actually encouraged. Whereas in India, with so much of heterogeneity, you look at Kashmir, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Kerala, Northeast, there are so many differences, the ethnical differences, social differences, developmental level is so different. So you may find go to a place, a lot of mines are there, you will find a lot of workers with diseases affecting the lung. It is well known in Rajasthan, for example. That is not a problem in Kerala. Kerala is a problem of re-emerging old infections or new infections, viral diseases coming, avian flu, all kinds of things. That's a different type of, if you go to Northeast, they have nasopharyngeal cancer, which doesn't exist in other places. So why not leave something for the university to innovate? No, we cannot do it today. We have one rule for everybody, all through the country, 1.2 billion people. There is absolutely no way anybody can innovate. Now, this is one of the reasons, whatever little originality is there, you have killed it. They cannot innovate. That is a big problem. And these are all, I have mentioned the problems, but what's the use of making a diagnosis without suggesting a treatment? So I must say something, I would go out on a limb. I realize this is being discussed today. There are big bodies at the government level. Medical Council has been dissolved. So what should come in its place? This is a subject of hot discussion. But I'm a free man, so I can say what I like. So I would go out on a limb to suggest my own outline. And I will not get into the question what should be its name, whether it should be administered by Ministry A or Ministry B. These are less important than what it should be and what it should do. That's all. I have given a tentative name, National Council for Medical Education. It can be anything else. This is only for convenience. Now, it should be headed by an eminent medical educationalist. And it should have about 8 to 10 members. And they should not be all medical people. They should represent biological sciences, para, clinical and clinical sciences, public health, sociology, and technology. There should be people representing all these disciplines in these 8 to 10. And how to make this election of the Medical Council, we have all seen, it is a flawed election. It has not really solved any of the Medical Council's problems. So instead of going on, in that manner, or unfettered nomination by the government. One via media, which should work very satisfactorily, is to have nomination from panels submitted by our science academies. These academies have been in existence for 70 years, like Indian National Science Academy. And there is no question that they, even with all our problems in this country, only very good scientists get elected as fellows. That's a fact. It is true, all good scientists may not get elected, but those get elected, you really cannot fault them. It is not on the basis of caste or region or anything, because there is a very rigorous process. Now, if those academies and ICSSR, which Professor Ram Reddy headed, if they are told in advance the importance of this body, and the people who are coming into this new body, they will be determining the future of medical education, future of medicine in this country, so that they send panels of good people. And the government nominates from that panel. So that way we are likely to have the best possible membership of this committee. And that will be the national authority for promotion and regulation of medical education, both. And they should function through committees. I'll come to that in a minute. And these two committees for promotion and regulation, they are independent of each other. And there should be a 10-year review of its performance by the parliament. There should be a parliamentary committee. They should look at how this is functioning. And this is what I'm suggesting. There is a National Commission on Medical Education at the top, and it should have two committees. One is for promotion of medical education. It has 3 constituent committees. They are not subcommittees. In other words, members here may be members of the smaller committees. One is a committee for undergraduate studies. Second is a committee for postgraduate studies in pre- and paraclinical sciences. And the third is a committee for postgraduate training. It is entirely different, but all 3 come under this. They are promotion of education. The other committee is a committee for regulation of medical education. That is entirely separate. I'll have something to say about each one of these as we go along. And this is the first committee, A1, which is set up by the National Council, 7 to 9 members. These are medical teachers, practicing physicians, scientists, sociologists, public health experts. This is for undergraduate education, incidentally. And essentially what they have to do is curriculum development. This is something we have not taken seriously, because many of these curriculum development, board of studies and so on that I am familiar with, these are a few medical teachers sitting around a table and discussing and writing something. What existed earlier, what somebody else is doing, and that is how the curriculum is developed. But what I'm saying, this is simply not enough anymore. What this particular think tank, this board of this particular committee, they should set up a think tank with a few core members, and they should co-opt people as necessary. And what they have to do, it should be institutionalized. For example, when you are teaching anatomy, how should you teach anatomy? Today we want to shorten the time, because that's how what used to be 2 years when we were students, now it is made 1 year, condensed. There is great pressure. Cadavers, difficult to get. And with 250 large number of students, there are not enough cadavers available. It's not possible for all students to get an opportunity to dissect anymore. So there is a farcical situation. Somebody is doing dissection, some 10 people looking on it. What good is it? How much learning do they do anatomy? So today there is technology available, like CT scan, many of you are familiar. Now you can take a cadaver and you can take slices, horizontal, vertical, whichever way you like, every 3 millimeters. You don't dissect anything, but you can see much better using this, the course of a nerve, its relations, all this you can see. You can go back and see it again. You can see the right, the left, back, everything, which we could not see in our cadaveric dissection. And if you, in the evening, if you want to go and check once again, you can go and check, which you cannot do with a cadaver. Now, this technology is available today. Now, this think tank, it is for them to think all these. I'm just giving one example. Or joints in physiology. We all learn about joints, how the mobility of the joints, lubrication of the joint, synovial fluid. We learn all that. But why not engineers, for example, they have a subject called tribology. It's a very important subject, lubrication. It's a very huge subject in engineering. Because a lubricant which works very well on the ground here, it may not work at the top of the Everest, or it may not work under sea. So the lubricity is a very important subject, but the human joints, this lubricity, it is working in all these places. How does nature do it? A lot of interesting information is available. So when you teach physiology of locomotion, should we not introduce some of this? Would it not make more interesting, more scientific? Like these hundreds of, whether it is physiology, anatomy, any subject, or take pharmacology. When you are teaching that, when you talk of pharmacogenomics, can you select this particular drug, this particular dose is good for this person? Same drug, it might not be suitable for another person at the same dosage. You have to change it. That decision is being made by pharmacogenomics. Should we really, how much genomics should we teach these students? Now, questions like this, you are really getting into science now, or public health. We are teaching community medicine, but how is it in a country like this? We have Bhopal disaster, we had Surat plague. How did we handle in this country? Very poorly. Even today, we have no final answers. We have reports, but we are not very sure whether Surat plague was plague at all when you read that report. And the final word has not been said about Bhopal. Was it MIC? Was it something else? Still the controversy goes on. So that is a public health disaster of the highest magnitude, but how can we build it into our training of students? How do you handle this? How do other countries do it? So therefore, all these questions like these, there are hundreds of them. It is the job of that think tank to look at advances taking place, our own past experience, and build it into the curriculum. And once you have a curriculum, you can even submit it to this committee, they put it on their website, elicit comments, and then do experiments. Teach this particular type of dissection in 1 or 2 medical colleges and see how it works. And then spread it all over India. So therefore, it is an active curriculum development. That is essentially the job of this committee. All the rest can take second place. But all this must be done 80% only. 20%, this committee, in other words, the undergraduate curriculum that you are developing, only 80% you are doing this. Public health, all this balance is observed. 20% you are leaving it for the universities. Encourage them to come up with their own ideas, their own programs. And if smaller universities, they are unable to do this, let them form a consortium. This committee should help them. Guwahati or smaller universities who need help, you help them so that they also innovate, because that is where progress could come from. And then we come to the committee A2, that is the pre and paraclinical sciences. There is a very grave concern. Unlike I said, you would expect a department of anatomy or physiology, biochemistry, you would expect a lot of junior research fellows doing PhD, a lot of papers being published, but nothing of this kind takes place. Everybody is studying for examinations. If you want to change this, this committee should have, say, 7 to 9 members. There should be medical teachers, but there should also be scientists. In other words, a biochemistry professor will be there, but there should also be a PhD in biochemistry from the university. He should also be there. So like that, it should be a balanced membership. Scientists who are actually doing research in these areas. And they develop the training programs. And what is important is to develop MD, PhD programs. There should be a clear target that out of this very large number of professors, faculty that we have in these subjects, 50% of them should be MD, PhDs. And here, this committee will have to work with the universities very closely, make it possible for university professors to have adjunct appointments in medical colleges. And some of these MD, PhDs who are working for this, they should be able to go and work in the university laboratories so that there should be a very close integration between the university programs and the medical colleges. So that if 50% of the faculty in pre and paraclinical sciences, they become MD, PhD in a matter of 10 years, there will be a revolutionary change in the research climate of medical colleges. You will find their teaching will not be affected adversely, I can tell you, but the quality of teaching, they are talking from their own experience, papers will come, and you will not have the disgraceful picture of 50% of the medical colleges publishing 0. That should not happen. That will change. And they should make these recommendations to the main National Council so that this becomes possible. And the A3 committee, which deals with clinical subjects, again, that is set up by the National Council, 7 to 9 members, but their basic job, if you look at these subjects like medicine, surgery, obstetrics, etc., here the emphasis is not on PhD. Because what do people expect when they go to a hospital? They want to have high quality care. They want the best surgeon to operate on them. They want to get well. They are not really interested whether the surgeon is a PhD or not. They want to get well. That is what the patients are interested. That's what the students are interested. So therefore, here, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that we should adopt the specialty board system in the United States. It is time-tested. We have so many specialties, medical specialties, surgical, and there are constantly new specialties being added. When I was a student, we had only medicine. Cardiology was not separate. Then cardiology is separate. Now cardiology has pediatric cardiology. And medical cardiology has invasive cardiology, non-invasive cardiology. So it keeps on specializing, subspecialization, goes on and on. So when that happens, it is necessary. But how do you regulate all this? How do you conduct examinations? Now, this is not possible for a central body sitting here to do this. That is a recipe for disaster. And they cannot conduct all these examinations either. We have 300 plus medical colleges. I heard Kapil Sibal saying that they are going to establish 700 universities in the next 10 years or 15 years. Then surely there will be another 300 medical colleges. So if you have 600 medical colleges with so many specialties proliferating, is it conceivable that a central body sitting here can set up standards, monitor them, and conduct examinations? So therefore, the specialty, this is not a problem that we are facing for the first time. Others have faced it, and faced it very successfully. So specialty boards are set up by this A3 committee, and task forces should be there. Task force of surgery, task force of medicine. The task force consists of people who are actually doing this. It's no use taking a professor of that specialty who has hardly done anything, a professor of surgery who is hardly doing 100 operations a year. It's no use keeping such people. We need people who are actually doing thousands of cases, who knows what it involves, the stresses involved, the training that is required, the kind of equipment that is required, how much time does it take to mature in that field. All this he knows from his experience. So you need people in the task force who are fully committed to this. Then you also have teachers, others, I have no problem. But the lead position should be taken by people who have hard practical experience. Now they decide, the task force recommends the duration of a training, the kind of facilities required in the training institutions, the kind of experience the teachers should have, the board examination requirements, etc. And we can look at the American experience and modify it as we want. But the basic thing is that boards should be autonomous, and the role of this A3 committee is in setting up these boards and also coordinating these activities of these boards. Make sure the board activities are monitored or accredited. I'll come to that also. All these, that is the job. If there is any jurisdictional problems, this committee has to come in. That is the role of this A3 committee. Otherwise, it is all left to the boards to do. And also they have to recommend the legitimacy of this board certification. That has been a problem with the national board here. Once this board certification comes, it should be considered equal to university degrees. If it doesn't have legitimacy, that is the job of this committee, to recommend to the National Council, which is set up by an act of parliament. They can make that decision, that this is considered equal to university degrees. It has that kind of legitimacy. And they should also update because we have new specialists coming all the time. Plastic and reconstructive, there is cosmetic surgery. So new specialists need to be added. So updating the list, that is also the job of this committee. And there should be an independent review at the end of 10 years. How are these boards function? What changes need to be made? And in all these, we should be constantly watching what other countries are doing, because this is not a problem we are facing alone. Even after all these years in Britain, the Royal Colleges, they have made so many changes. They had Royal College in London, in Edinburgh, in Glasgow. Now they join together. They are also, after hundreds of years, they are experimenting. And they look at what is happening in Europe. Now there is European Union, so they try to integrate what is happening in Europe. So to learn from others is not a disgrace. we should continue to do, not to copy, but to assimilate whatever is good, whatever is appropriate. And the committee B, this is the regulatory committee. Now this committee is somewhat different from all the other three committees because, again, 7 to 9 members, but the membership should be the deans, vice chancellors, experts on legal and financial aspects of higher education. This is something which many of us are not aware of. I was not aware of until I became a vice chancellor, that to a private university with no grants from the government, all the income has to come from student fees. Suddenly I realized how enormously difficult it is. I did not realize the costing of medical education because I used to pay 250 rupees every year as my fees in the Medical College Trivandrum. So my understanding was maybe 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees. This is the impression with which many of us come. But when you actually do the costing of medical education, fees, electricity, water, chemicals, drugs, patient expenditure, depreciation, I realized it was at that time, 1994, Ferguson and Company did I sat with them. I realized it was 2.5 lakhs a year for a student. That is a medical college with all these facilities. Spending 60 lakhs a year on the library, etc. A very good medical college. That was the cost. It came as an eye-opener to me. I could not imagine that is the cost. So the Kerala, the people who were paying for my education, which I never realized. I thought I was paying for my education. I was not. So therefore, the knowledge of the financial aspects of higher education, that's very important. Similarly, legal, both these. So the people in this committee, they should be very knowledgeable on all these. And also quality assurance and accreditation. That's a different area altogether. We have people in this country, as you know, CRISIL, the hotels accreditation, that's a big subject in itself. All these ISO 9000, that's a big field in itself. They have international bodies. So the accreditation, people who are thoroughly experts in that, they should also be in that. And there should be a national medical register, which is already there in the medical council, liaison with state medical councils, and disciplinary procedures against for unprofessional conduct. These are all the routine things. But the main activity of this committee is this. Recommending medical college projects, which is again medical council is doing now based on physical and academic criteria, recommending whether it should be approved. But the most important is the second point, standard requirements in terms of physical academic criteria for a medical college. That committee A has already laid down, but you have to convert this into standards, which can be used for a protocol for accreditation. That is the job of this committee. Based on what is recommended, the academic criteria, various other criteria by the promotion committee, they have to develop standards which an accreditation committee can use for accreditation. A model protocol they have to develop. That should be made known to everybody. That is the main job of this committee. And then, not to stop there, they should have a global tender, in my view. Invite accreditation councils, Indian, British, American, Australian, let them. But they will accredit based on our model protocol. And I'm sure that they will be interested because we have 300 plus medical colleges, we have 600. So these are all paying propositions. So they will come, very good accreditation bodies from all over the world. And they should select from among them, and maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. That is recommended to the National Council, and they say that these accreditation bodies are recognized for 5 years. So it is open to the medical council, medical college anywhere, to select any one of these. Manipal may select one, Lady Harding may select another. Government colleges also, it should be made mandatory. It is not that government colleges can get away without accreditation. All colleges must have accreditation because doctors coming out, they are going to treat sick people. So it is essential that this is insisted on. And once that accreditation is done, this is decentralized. No longer any Inspector Raj, which should go once and for all. So the central body sitting here, a National Council, is not going to do any inspection. They don't select inspectors. It is all done by professional bodies. They go by the criteria laid down, and the approval is given finally by the National Council based on the accreditation report. I also feel this is a controversial thing. I find that the standards, MBBS standards, I have seen some MBBS students coming from different parts of India for postgraduate admissions in Manipal. And I'm very much distressed by the quality, the difference, enormous variation. I'm not even sure whether some of them should practice medicine. The basic knowledge is lacking. How they managed to get an MBBS, I'm not sure. Now, with another 300 medical colleges coming, all this is likely to increase these differences. And we are talking about a 3-year rural medicine and surgery. Some particular state wants to introduce it. Maybe it is necessary in that particular state. But in many other states, it is not necessary. For example, a state like Kerala, in my state, I know they are severely opposed to this. The government itself has said, we will not have it. So when this is going to happen, this kind of disparity is increasing in the field of education. I feel it is perfectly legitimate to delink the degrees from licensure. Today, an MBBS degree, automatically you get licensed to practice. That should stop. There should be a licensure examination, very simple, not like MBBS. Licensure examination is simply whether this man knows when to prescribe morphine, when to prescribe aspirin. Simple, common pharmacology. How to recognize an infectious disease, somebody with a rash. He should be able to make out involving public safety. Only such questions. You do not ask questions which you ask in the MBBS examination or postgraduate examination. Simple questions about pharmacology. Where is the liver? Is it in the abdomen or in the chest? Ask questions like that. Simple questions. And you will be surprised that some people don't pass this examination. So a licensure examination for each state council should be due. Now, today the state councils are toothless bodies. Nobody really even knows whether they exist, but they do exist. So they should be empowered to conduct these examinations for each state, and the National Council can conduct for all India licensure. So that, I think, we should bring about so that in future, otherwise we are going to have problems in the next 3-4 years. But in India, we only act when there is a crisis. We do not take any action before the crisis comes. But this is simply to prevent such a crisis coming. And re-licensure examinations, now there is a law. At the end of 5 years, you have to renew your license to practice. But how do you, for renewal, you have to go through certain credit hours of attending courses, etc., etc. Who is going to conduct these courses? Now the legislation only says it can be conducted by medical association, it can be conducted by a university, it can be conducted by this, and so on. It's rather vague. But I can tell you, now nobody is taking this seriously, but there is going to be a crisis coming, not too far away, because I have seen a calculation done by a particular group. There are 100,000 doctors. They all have to pass this licensure examination, re-licensure. Now they have to take this course. Now the course can be conducted by various people. So suppose a particular organization decides to conduct this course, and they charge 10,000 rupees, which a doctor will easily pay once in 5 years. And if you have 100,000 doctors taking the examination, he has very little investment, and there is a lot of money involved. And surely this is one of the areas where you will find, according to their estimate, it was 100 crores they are planning to make. I'm myself surprised. But why not have the state medical councils? They should be authorized. They should have the power to do this, conduct these examinations through a university, etc. But they should be responsible for conducting this. It should be specified. Now I want to conclude by saying that this is a very famous quotation from Tale of Two Cities. Many of you are familiar. Dickens was referring to a particular phase in European history, the French Revolution. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. So here we have a pair of opposites representing a particular phase in European history. Now here also in medical education, we are in a somewhat similar situation. On the one hand, in the Platinum Jubilee year, the central body representing medical education has been abolished. That is the dark side. But on the bright side, there is a possibility that we could build a very bright future. So the choice, according to me, is very clear, whether we want to tinker with a sorry past or whether you should take the sunlit path ahead. That choice we have to make, but only time will tell whether we will make the right choice. Thank you very much.